The Secret to the Ideal Wedding Day Portrait with Alison Yin Weddings and Drobo. Hello everyone, welcome to our live webinar with Drobo and Alison Yin Weddings. My name is Samina Sibidar and I'm the Marketing Director at Drobo. And we have Alison here with us today. She's going to be giving us some photography tips. I'll be talking about what Drobo does as a storage solution. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type them up on the sidebar and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And of course, we're going to be giving away a $100 gift card at the very end, so make sure that you stay to find out who the winner is. All right, great. Thank you, Alison, for allowing us to be in your beautiful studio today.
Oh, my
it's
pleasure.
Lovely to have you.
Thanks. It's fun to be here.
Awesome. So why don't you start, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a wedding photographer in Oakland. I photograph weddings full-time with my husband, Adam, and we do about 25 weddings a year. We've been doing this for about 8 years now.
Awesome. And tell us a little bit about your style.
Yeah, so our style is what we like to call fine art documentary wedding photography. So that means we want to take a very natural approach. We try and get all of those great real moments, a lot of candids. You know, we want our couples to be focused on celebrating with their family and friends. And we feel like if they're doing that, then great pictures will come. So we try to be hands off, but then give them direction where we feel like it's needed so that we make sure they have great pictures.
And it seems like photojournalism is a real trend these days.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a trend. It's definitely been around for a while. Both Adam and I got our starts, you know, working in newspapers. We went to school for photojournalism. So it was a very natural transition to kind of photograph weddings in that documentary style for us.
Okay, and you work with your husband. How long have you guys been working together?
8 years, or I guess actually more closer to 10 years. So
okay,
8 to 10 years.
Now, if you're someone who's looking to get married, you're going to be a potential bride, what should you consider when you're looking for a photographer?
Yeah, so I think there's 3 main things we always tell our clients that they want to keep in mind when they're picking a wedding photographer. You know, the first is style. There's a bunch of great photographers out there, and they shoot in different styles. You know, there's obviously, we talked about the documentary photojournalism type. There's photographers who do a lot of portraits. They might be a little bit more traditional, very posed. There's photographers who, you know, want to make you look like you're stepping right off of a magazine cover, more like fashion and editorial. So basically we say find a style that fits best with what you're looking for. And you can get a great sense of that by looking at photographers' online portfolios and their websites. Obviously budget is another key consideration. We always encourage people to make sure they're making a decision, you know, that fits with what they can afford. It's definitely not worth it to break the bank, you know, for a wedding. And then finally, and I think this part is really often overlooked, but we think it's really important that people make sure that they like their photographers who they're choosing. It doesn't matter, you know, like how great of a photographer they might be. If your personalities don't click or if there's just something that's off, that's gonna not only show in your wedding pictures, that feeling of you being uncomfortable, right, but also it's gonna kind of make for a miserable wedding day. Because, you know, I think people don't realize, like, we're with you on this really special day and some really intimate moments. It's like the bride and her mom getting dressed and then, oh, hey, here I am in the background. Yeah, so make sure you pick a photographer who you feel like you can relax and be comfortable around. And often, you know, that comes from if you can do like a phone meeting or a video or ideally in person.
So how many times do you typically meet with your clients before the big day? Yeah,
so off of that, we try and encourage in-person meetings, consultations before they book us, if that's possible, just to make sure we're all a good fit. You know, we do work with people who live out of town, so that's not always realistic. So then we try and do a video conversation or at the very least a phone meeting. We do engagement sessions with our couples. Not all of our couples, I'd say about 50%, so engagement sessions aren't necessary, but if you do one, then that's obviously another.
Definitely helps.
Face-to-face, yeah. And then we always try and scout also before the wedding, and so that would be another in-person, and we love scouting with our clients. So I guess ideally, you know, 2 to 3 times before the wedding, we have some kind of in-person interaction.
All right, great. So let's dive into your work. I'd love to see some of your work and how you captured those moments.
Great. So yeah, we're talking today about, making great wedding day portraits. And for us, our philosophy is we want to feel like it's a collaboration where we're working with our clients to kind of execute their vision and produce photos that are going to be meaningful for them. So a big part of that, I feel like, is making sure your clients trust you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that they feel comfortable around you. And that all goes back to like building rapport, and we do that during the meetings and just making sure that you're a good fit. So here, often what happens on a wedding day is we'll put our couples in a location and then just tell them to interact with each other. And that's what happened here. We put them in a spot, and we're like, all right, interact with each other. And they're very like this.
That's normal.
Yeah. And this couple is like, they're really happy. They're very, they're dynamic with each other. It's very sweet. And you can really see that in the photo. They're having this like very sweet kind of like very smiley moment. And so I think that's a great picture that reflects who they are as a couple, which is kind of what we aim to do.
Now, I remember when I got married and we were taking our wedding portraits, I think the click would just kind of throw me off a little bit. Is there a way you can silence the shutter?
Yeah, so on our cameras right now, there is a mode where you can use it. It's called silent shutter, but it's not entirely silent. You still can hear it, but it's definitely much more diminished than, if it's on its regular mode. So we always shoot in that mode, and that definitely helps. Even just like being outside, there's street noise and there's stuff going on. So I feel like it's not quite as invasive as if you're like in a church and it's completely silent, and then all of a sudden that shutter goes off.
Right.
So yeah,
now
that definitely helps.
Okay. Now, in terms of the setting, can you talk a little bit about what setting you used and what kind of focus?
Yeah. So this portrait was taken outside in the afternoon. It was a bright, sunny day, so there's a lot of natural light. We always try and actually, if possible, schedule the portraits around the light when the light's going to be nice. In theory, we would have shot this later in the day when the sun's a little bit lower and not quite as bright, but we didn't have that option. So instead, we look for an area where there's a lot of foliage. There's even lighting on them. First and foremost, we always want to make sure our couples look great and are in flattering light. So with this picture, we stood a little bit farther back, used a little bit of a longer lens, used some foliage and leaves to frame, the couple and have it be a little bit out of focus at a more shallow depth of field.
Yes, I really love the out of focus here. The next picture we're going to take a look at, I really love this one. This is really cute.
Yeah, so this is great. This is a really fun and kind of spontaneous moment that just, randomly happened. This is not anything where we're like, okay, now jump into the air. You can tell here, like the groom, Percy, he's a little bit goofy, and he just randomly did that. So we want to be in a position where we can like be ready to anticipate these fun moments that happen. And I think this is, again, like a great reflection of kind of their dynamic and how they relate. This couple relates to one another.
You can tell the bride is asking, "What are you doing?" But
yeah,
it's
she's
such a
like,
great
"What
shot.
are you doing?" So, and then he's just like, "I'm getting married, up in the air." It's awesome.
Awesome. All right, the next picture we have is this black and white picture, and I really love the framing of the text. What is this about?
Yeah, so this was a really fun portrait session that happened on their wedding day. This couple got married in San Francisco, and they had a pretty traditional wedding and reception, like at all very established venues throughout the city. And so for their portraits, they kind of wanted to mix it up a little bit and do something that felt more casual, more like them. This is their favorite rice pudding shop that happened to be like a block from where they lived. So on their wedding day, we walked down the street and they ordered some rice pudding, sat in the front window, and were feeding each other rice pudding, which is great because when they, 20 years from now, when they look back at this photo, they're going to be like, oh yeah, remember that time we lived in that cute apartment in San Francisco? We used to go get rice pudding all the time. And it's really fun. It's also like a fun activity, a snack. They made sure they also had a snack on their wedding day, and then it's this cute interaction where they're feeding each other. So that is one of my favorite photos.
Yeah, I really like the personalization here. Now this is a really nice shot too. How did you do this one?
Yeah, so this picture, you know, we always ask our clients, like, well, what would make your wedding pictures feel special to you? Or is there anything that you really want included? And, you know, this couple, their dog is like the center, at this time was the center of their world. And so they were like, we really want to have some pictures with our dog and on our wedding day, which I can totally relate to. We have our own fur baby, so, and she was part of our wedding as well. So especially knowing that ahead of time, then we can be like, great, we're gonna do a portion of your wedding portraits with your dog there. And you know, you make sure, like, we'll bring treats, and we have someone who's a specified handler. I think in this case, it was the sister of the bride who was standing nearby for when we weren't gonna do portraits with the dog. But it's just, you know, this picture I think is gonna be really special to the couple down the line too, because it's like, yeah, we had this little dog on our wedding day who we loved and was a member of our family and part of our pictures, so.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's nice to have a handler nearby. I think that's one tip that everyone should concentrate on.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. I mean, these portraits, in some way, there is a certain spontaneity to them, but for the most part, they don't just come together. There's different elements that you want to plan and take into account, and it just makes things go so much more smoothly on your wedding day.
All right, great.
So, and here, this is another great example of, you know, the couple feeling really comfortable to be themselves. And then that way we can get this great moment. And I think it really captures their true, like, joy of getting married.
So how do you manage for the day? It seems like there's a lot going on. So how do you kind of build around that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is that you want to come away from someone's wedding day with these great portraits, but you have a really short amount of time to do that. So for us, planning is really key. And there's two main things that we need to plan around. One is we want to plan, you know, the timeline to make sure we have enough time allocated for what we need to do, and that ideally it works with when the light is going to be great, or at least we need to take into account what the light's going to look like at the time that we've set aside for portraits. And then the other thing is locations. And so I mentioned earlier, you know, we scout with our clients before the wedding, and that's really important. That basically means, like, we show up to where they're getting married and talk about, like, okay, where are we going to do all of your portraits? And that's when they get to be like our art directors and walk around and show us, oh, we love this tree. Oh, we hate that tree. Or like, oh, this wall is amazing, but this area, we don't care so much about that. So then we can have a conversation with them that is like, hey, well, if we're gonna do pictures in front of this tree, that's great, we love it. Let's try and do that at this time of day when the light is gonna be really nice.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's really a collaboration. And then also, we know going into their wedding day, we have a really firm idea of, like, where we're going to be shooting and what their priority locations are. Like, okay, they love this spot, and this spot, and we're going to try and hit up all three. But if we're not able to get to all of them because of time constraints, at least we're going to get their top two.
Now, in most of the pictures that we took a look at, a lot of the weather was really lovely. How do you account for weather?
Right, so we always do try and come up with a rain plan or a wind plan. You know, it's just being prepared. It's like channeling your inner Girl Scout. Really, you know, like our wedding this last weekend, for example, we had all these great outdoor locations planned, and the week before it was like 90% chance of rain on their wedding day. Right. So I called them up and I was like, okay, let's come up with some locations where we can shoot in the rain. And also, we talked about getting umbrellas, so they got these, you know, cute, clear umbrellas for themselves. The couple did, and for themselves and their bridal party, and that made for some fun pictures as well. So a lot of it is just preparation. It's like the more that you can plan, the more if you have a rain plan, 9 times out of 10 you're not going to have to use that rain plan. If you don't have one, then you're going to get stuck. And just the more things that you have planned, the better prepared you'll be when things go off track or something unexpected comes up.
So typically you'll want to have kind of a game plan for indoor lighting as well if there's a chance of rain.
Definitely, yeah. Our couple last weekend, they had a great indoor venue, and we had walked through it all beforehand, and so we knew, like, oh, they really like this. They got married in a museum, so it's like they really like this part of the museum and this part as well, and maybe not this part. So.
Okay, cool. So when you take a look at our next series of pictures, it's going to be, I believe, the couple throughout the day.
Yeah, so the next 5 photos are examples from one single wedding and a real wedding, and the same couple. And so the first two pictures were at a location that was actually about a 5-minute drive from where they got married.
This is beautiful. Where is this?
So this is up in Donner Pass, which is kind of outside Tahoe. And yeah, I mean, in that area, you really can't go wrong with locations. But this was right after their ceremony. They hopped in the car and we drove 5 minutes to this location and did a series of portraits. And it's, in the afternoon, so the light is pretty bright. This is usually like, this is about as bright as I like to shoot in the middle of the day. But I think, so this picture and then the next picture as well were taken at the exact same location. And you can really get a sense for like, they look like completely different photos. And so the way that we're able to do that is, I always carry 2 cameras. They each have different lenses. Okay. And that way I can, go for as much variety as possible.
What type of lenses do you use? Yeah,
so I use what's called prime lenses, which means they're fixed length lenses. And so in my arsenal, I have a 35 millimeter, 50 millimeter, and 85 millimeter. And then I also have a telephoto zoom lens, so 70 to 200. And those are all the lenses that I use. For portraits, like in a situation like this, I don't, where we are basically we spend like 10 minutes driving and then we have maybe about 15 minutes to shoot.
Right.
I don't want to be weighed down by gear. So I'll go to something like this with just a camera on each shoulder and probably my 35 millimeter on one camera and then the 70 to 200 on the other. And then that way I can just go back and forth between those cameras very easily.
If you had to choose, what would be your go-to lens?
So if I was limited to one lens, it would definitely be the 50. It's a great lens.
Okay, and that would be for both wedding photography and just everyday photography as well?
Yeah, I mean, I specialize in photographing people. So if I were a product photographer, that probably wouldn't work out that well. But for all of the things that I like to photograph, meaning people, I would go with the 50.
All right, awesome. The next picture we're going to take a look at, this is a really adventurous couple. What happened here? Yeah,
so this couple got married, obviously outside, and you're right, they're adventurous. They love spending time out in the outdoors, so they really wanted that to come through in their portraits. So this was, I would say, our second portrait session of their wedding day, and it was right around when the sun was starting to set, so the light was really nice, and it was just like a 2-minute walk from where their reception was happening. Actually, all the people who were eating dinner could actually see while we were taking these photos. So it's very easy access. And I always try and grab our couples for about 5 to 10 minutes of pictures during sunset if possible. Mm-hmm. And so this was something that we had scouted beforehand.
So she didn't just hop on a log?
She didn't just hop on a log, yeah. We had walked around the day before and I had noticed these logs and I was like, oh, these logs are awesome. It would be great if you could, do you feel comfortable hopping up there? And being adventurous, they felt very comfortable. And with something like this, you also want to make sure like, okay, well, what kind of shoes are you going to be wearing on the wedding day? It's really hard to hop up on logs in like 4-inch stilettos. So she had flats and so it made it a lot easier. But that's also a case where if she had been wearing 4-inch stilettos the day before and us telling her like, hey, it'd be handy to have a pair of flats nearby for portraits. Those are all the kind of like little prepared planning things you want to keep in mind for the portrait session.
Good to know.
Yeah. So then
here's the flats.
Yeah, there are the flats. So this is, same 5-minute portrait session, and this is a totally different picture. This couple, they're basically like running down the hill on their wedding day. I'm not suggesting that every couple do this. Like, if you're not into the outdoors, obviously this would not be a good fit for you. But what we really try and emphasize is making pictures that are a reflection of who these people are. And so we really try to go into each wedding without any preconceived notions of like what we want to do, but instead let their personalities and their interests kind of dictate how the photos are going to look.
Yeah, this is a really beautiful shot here.
Thank you. And this is great. Again, like super adventurous. They had to hike up a hill to get to this spot. And not everyone is willing to do that in their wedding clothes. But I think it's just a matter of trying to figure out like what's important to them and then trying to find ways to have that translate in the photos. And it just makes for a really fun wedding portrait.
Yeah, I think this is my favorite shot right here. I really love the framing of the trees here. What kind of lens did you use here?
So this lens, I believe I used I'm on the spot now. I would say I believe that I used a 70-200 with that lens. I did not hike up the hill with them. I can say that in video once. But so I was at a distance and I was photographing them from a distance, so I needed a tighter lens to do that. But yeah, I mean, the thing that I really wanted to show with especially those last 3 photos, like those were all taken in the span of 5 minutes pretty much. And you're still, even with that short amount of time, because we went in knowing where we wanted to shoot them and knowing the kinds of pictures that we wanted to make because of our scouting the day before, we were able to make a ton of, like great portraits that looked really different from each other in such a short amount of time.
Okay, great. So if someone's looking to get into wedding photography, what kind of equipment do they need right away?
Yeah, so your equipment, I think, is the more you take pictures, the more you'll kind of fall into what your personal preferences are. But I would say definitely to start, you need 2 cameras at least. Like gear has failed on us. We've doing adventure weddings, you fall down, right. And we've broken equipment, so you definitely at least need one backup. But 2 camera bodies and at least 2 lenses, something that allows you to go wide, something that allows you to go tight. Flashes, we always, I would say for 9 out of our 10 weddings, we light the reception areas for dancing.
Okay.
And so, and in order to do that, what we do is we set up external flashes and then connect what's called a pocket wizard, which is basically a radio transmitter to the flash. And then, that allows us to fire the flash from across the room where we are maybe photographing someone dancing. So
it is possible to start off as a solo photographer.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of great wedding photographers out there who are solo photographers who don't shoot with second photographers. For me, I found that having a partner just makes things a lot easier, and the quality of the work that we produce is much higher.
Right.
But again, that's all back to personal preference.
So what brand of camera do you use?
I use Canon.
Okay, and is that same for the lenses as well?
Yeah, we use Canon cameras, Canon lenses, Canon flashes. I don't want to come off as Canon spokesperson.
Right.
But there's a lot of great, I would say Nikon and Canon are probably the top 2 brands that wedding photographers look to. And I really look at cameras and lenses as just tools. So, you figure out, the more you do this, the more you're able to figure out which tools work best for you. Mm-hmm. And so maybe you don't get quite as stuck on the brand. But
right.
Yeah.
So what kind of budget would someone look at when they're initially starting off?
Yeah, so I think, I guess going back to my gear list, I think you need the 2 cameras, at least 2 lenses, at least 1 flash, probably 2 flashes. And then because we're doing things all digitally, you need computers and software and hard drives. So I think you're looking at a minimum of $15,000 to get started.
And it's not necessary to spend that up front. You kind of do it as you go.
Yeah, you can, renting is a great way to have access to gear. And especially if you don't know exactly what lenses you want to use. I found that my personal preference is with the prime lenses, but I know a lot of people shoot with zoom lenses. So if you're not sure, I would say rent until you figure out what works best for you.
Okay. And starting off, when you first started off as a photographer, how did you promote your business?
Yeah, so we got really lucky. We have not really had to do a lot of paid advertising, knock on wood. But when we first started, I was in my early 20s and had a lot of friends and family members, cousins who were also around the same age, and they were starting to get married. And so really all I did was I made a promo postcard, 4x6 postcard, put on, some pictures, all my contact information, website, and then gave my friends and family stacks of these postcards.
Before social media.
Yeah, this was all before social media. Not that I'm great at social media now, but yes, before social media. So really I gave out these stacks of postcards to everybody that I knew, and they really helped promote our work and helped to bring in a lot of business. I remember my friend, she works for a major winery. She would find out one of her coworkers got engaged, and she'd go over and be like, hey, congratulations. By the way, my friend's an awesome wedding photographer, and she like had her stuff ready to give to her. But I don't think it was that direct, but it was just that kind of word of mouth marketing that really helped us.
And it sounds like the vendor network is really important as well.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of people who have to work together to pull in, make a wedding happen. And so you've got your wedding planners and the florists and the caterers and your makeup and hair artists and DJs and videographers and all of these people. And so, it's kind of like it's not a team sport, but you are working as part of a team.
Right.
And so if you find people who you work really well with, then you're going to want to partner with them. And we've gotten a lot of great work from referrals from our other wedding vendors.
Okay. So after you've taken all these beautiful portraits and pictures, how do you store and back up your data?
Yeah, so I've always been taught that unless your photos are in 3 separate places, they're not safe, right? So we use external hard drives and then also online storage.
Awesome. Well, this is an awesome segue to talk about what Drobo does as a company and as a business. So what do we do? So we actually produce storage arrays. And so we believe that the digital files are really important to photographers such as yourself, and that the storage systems should protect your data against hard drive failure. And that's exactly where Drobo comes in. And it should be an easy, simple to use plug and play solution that you can actually require different capacity and buy what you need and add more capacity as you move forward. So let's get a little bit into the target cases and segments here. So who uses Drobo storage arrays? Again, our value proposition is simplicity. Our storage device is the easiest to use storage device on the market. So we have the connected home user or the prosumer, and they typically use our backup for data protection. They have a high volume of rich media to share. And then we have professionals such as yourself. Photographers are a really huge segment. So you can have amateurs, pros, videographers, designers, and they want high capacity, reliable, and easy to use storage that's expandable. You want to really grow as you go. And then we also have the SMB market in large, medium and large departments and work groups as well. So typically for small to medium-sized businesses, it's typically employees who have who are less than 200, and they also don't really have kind of a dedicated IT professional. So that's where Drobo comes in. If you don't have a dedicated IT professional, you want to have something that really manages itself, and that's exactly what Drobo does as well. And of course, it's easy and affordable. So in terms of the benefits of Drobo, what is our difference? So for example, in the Drobo Mini, the 5D, and the 5N, we have hot data caching, which basically means that you can add an mSATA card to the bottom of the bay, and it increases read performance. So typically up to 30%, and it also has speedy retrieval of data protection for applications such as your iTunes or your iPhoto, and for photographers, Lightroom and Aperture as well. And then on the SMB side, we also have hybrid storage options, and that's also available in our B810N, the B810i, and the B1200i. We just came out with the B810N and the B810i. These are new versions of our previous 8-bay models. So hybrid storage, what does that mean? That means that you can use HDDs and SSDs. HDDs are the 3.5-inch drives, and the SSDs are the 2.5-inch drives. So the SSDs are, again, good for easy retrieval of information that you're using frequently. So for example, if the Drobo will actually recognize which files that you're accessing frequently, and it'll make those available to you. So, again, the benefits are affordability, it's simple, it's automated, which is really important, and all the applications point to one system. The Drobo difference. So we use a technology called Beyond RAID, and it eliminates the traditional barriers of RAID. So what that means is that you can hot swap drives to increase capacity and replace the bad drives. So the Drobo will actually tell you when your drive is bad or has failed. You simply follow the lights that are located on the exterior of the drive. And when you see a red light, you just pop out that drive and put in a new one. So the Drobo actually stripes the data across all of the drives itself. So it recognizes when something has failed, and it'll actually rebuild that system for you.
So Samina, just to jump in really quickly,
Sure.
if a drive does fail, that means that the way that the system is set up, you don't actually lose, we wouldn't lose any content.
No, you don't lose any of your data because, like I said, the data has been striped across all of the drives. So of course you want to use at least more than one drive to make sure that that doesn't happen, and the system will rebuild itself.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and it's really easy to use. It's very elegantly designed. In other manufacturers, sometimes you might have to screw in the drives. There's no screws necessary, tools. And again, with the traffic light analogy, red means that you have to replace or add a drive. Yellow means that the drive is becoming full. And then green lights mean that everything's A-okay, don't worry about anything. So here is the Drobo product family. And so on the far left, you'll see that we have the Mini, which is actually our portable Drobo. So a lot of photographers actually use this when they're on location, and this uses 2.5-inch SSD drives. And then you have the 4-bay, which is a direct attached storage and actually attached directly to your computer via a USB 3.0. This is kind of our starter 4-bay. It retails for $299. And then you have the 5-bay, so you have the 5D and the 5N. The 5D is actually really popular with photographers. It's directly attached to your computer via USB or Thunderbolt, so it's really speedy. 5N is if you are a department or a work group, or you're at home and you want to share files across the network. And then on the far right, you'll see all of our SMD models, which is again the B810N, the B810I, and B1200I as well. And this is typically for smaller businesses and work groups within a larger organization.
So for, I'm just thinking about our workflow process, and Adam and I probably create somewhere around maybe 400 to 500 gigabytes worth of content data that we want to actually save and store. What do you think you would recommend? Or what product would you recommend?
So the good thing about Drobo is that you can start with any capacity that you require. So a lot of photographers, depending on what they need, like 1 terabyte is a good place to start. You can also start with 500 gigabytes as well, depending on your needs. And then you grow grow your hard drives as you go along in terms of how much more capacity that you need. Cool. So we're gonna jump into Q&A session here. We've had some questions that are actually popping up throughout the webinar. And let's take a look right here. So we have actually a question for you, Alison, in terms of packages. What kind of packages do you offer?
Yeah, so we offer, there's the funny thing about wedding photographers is that there's a wide spectrum of different packages and options and what people, sell to their clients. So we found that our favorite part of being, photographing someone's wedding is like the picture taking part, right? So the packages we offer are all based on wedding day coverage for the most part, like, wedding coverage, extra photo sessions, like an engagement session, additional coverage, and then there are some add-ons that are albums. We also really feel like albums are the best way to showcase people's wedding pictures. So our packages are really geared around what we want our clients to have. So that they're, like we have 3 packages. One is just wedding coverage, 8 hours of wedding coverage, 2 photographers and all your files. The next package includes an engagement session and an album, and then the last one includes an engagement session and then a different kind of album, like much larger album.
So we have a question from Robert. He's a new photographer, and is there one tip that you would recommend for someone starting out?
Yeah, take pictures. It's like anything that you're starting to do, the best way to get better is to just do it over and over and over again. And if you can try and find jobs where you can be a second shooter, or even if starting off as an assistant to a wedding photographer, or whatever type of photography you want to get into, I would recommend that. Sometimes even maybe taking your friends out and pretending to do an engagement session,
right.
Practice feeling comfortable directing people and interacting with them and figuring out, ways to make pictures that are representative of who they are. Just practicing. And then also, one thing that I really did a lot when I was starting out was looking at other people's work. I think it was, and not just looking at it to try and be like, oh, that is a great picture. How did they do that? I want to try and recreate it. It was more looking at it as a way to like train my eye for example, to see light and to see composition and to look at a picture and analyze, like, okay, where's the different parts of light coming from, and then trying to see that as you're walking around in your day-to-day life, and be like, okay, where's the light while I'm here waiting for the bus?
Right.
So just training your eye on light and composition.
Yeah, I always hear that from photographers. Lighting is really important.
It's key. They say that there's 3 main things that make a great photo. It's light, composition, and then moment. And if you have 2 of those 3, your photo is probably in really great shape. If you have all 3, you've got a banger.
We have a question from Joyce. She wants to know if you need to have mastery of applications such as Photoshop when you're starting off initially.
Yeah, I think Photoshop, it's kind of like, your cameras and lenses, your gear, it's another tool, right? And so I would say I'm not a Photoshop pro. I've been doing this 8 years. I'm still not a Photoshop pro. Photoshop is a really powerful application or software. It can do a lot of things. And I probably use maybe 1/10 of its capabilities. So I think the best way, I also come from a background of, documentary journalistic photography, where it's kind of like you try to be as hands-off with Photoshop as possible.
Right.
So I think, try and figure out what style you want to go for with your pictures, and then figure out how Photoshop can enhance that and add to that. But it's also, you can learn as you go. That's what I did. I look at the pictures from when our first year of starting the business, and the way that we image them in Photoshop is pretty different than what we do now. And so that's okay. Things change over time.
Right, so you don't necessarily have formal training. It's kind of learn as you go.
Yeah, and nowadays there's so many great online tutorials and web videos that can show you at least the basics. And then once you get the basics down, then you just start playing around with it. And
do you have a go-to resource online?
Oh, I do not. Honestly, I think the part right now is I'm part of an online wedding photography Facebook group. And so that's been really helpful it's more, questions that come up with situational things related to your weddings or interacting with clients. And so if you can have a community of people, whether you know them in person, if you've met them in person, that's great. If not, that's okay too nowadays. Right. And so that way you have support, where if you come across a sticky situation and you're like, you want to throw it out to the group, it's really helpful to get their feedback.
Awesome. So we have a couple of questions for Drobo. So what is the most popular Drobo among photographers? So with photographers, it really depends on what you're doing. So typically the most popular one right now is the 5D. If you have kind of a home office, and a lot of people actually like the Mini as well, but the 5D is really popular because it's directly attached to your computer, and it's super fast with the Thunderbolt connectivity. And in terms of purchasing, we saw some questions on where to get the Drobo. So we do actually have an online store called drobostore.com, where you can purchase Drobos bundled with drives or empty. And then of course you have the large e-tailers and retailers where Drobo is also carried. So for example, like at B&H Photo, Amazon, Newegg, you can also purchase from there as well. All right, so let's see, Allison, we have a couple more questions. We're going to take more questions. Mike, we have a question from Mike for Allison. Do you do digital albums? If so, and with what software?
Yeah, so I take all our pictures are digital. So we design our albums online using it's a great program called Smart Albums, or Pixeloo. They kind of go back between the 2 names. But if you just Google Smart Albums, you'll be able to find it. And it makes our album designing process like a breeze. It's great.
Okay, great. We have a question for Drobo, which drives are recommended. So in terms of manufacturers, you can actually use any type of drive. So a lot of people use WD, a lot of people use Seagate, and the great thing about the Drobo is that you don't have to use just one manufacturer. You can actually put in any manufacturer and any capacity into the drive, into the Drobo, and it'll actually work just fine. All right, we're going to take a couple more questions. Let's see here. For Allison, let's see. There's a lot of questions popping through. In terms of starting off, do you have any other additional tips?
Yeah, I mean, really, the thing that you want to do is just go out there and practice as much as possible. You know, a lot of people have always, I hear from a lot of beginning photographers like, well, if we don't have any pictures in our wedding, like if we haven't actually photographed a wedding, how are we going to get, you know, someone to hire us for a wedding? And I would just say that's where like second shooting really can come in handy a lot. I've also known photographers who have actually even staged weddings and photographed it and used that entire wedding as their portfolio, which in a lot of ways, I mean, it's a lot of work, but it also makes a lot of sense because that way you can like stage the style of weddings that you want to have people drawn towards your work for. So it gives you a lot more control over what your portfolio is going to look like, which in turn can help you kind of figure out who your ideal client is. So, or attract your ideal client.
So we're going to start wrapping things up. We went a little bit over time, but we had a lot of great questions. So the winner is actually going to be Mike. And so Mike, you're the winner of the $100 Visa gift card. So if you just email us at marketing@drobo.com and send us your address, we'll also get that Visa card right out to you. If you have any other questions, you can email us at marketing@drobo.com. And if you want to get a hold of Alison, what's the best way?
Email is great. My email is Alison, ALISON, @AlisonYinWeddings.com.
All right, awesome. Thank you again.